Can you see what I see? If you can see what I see, raise your left hand. That's great. Thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Brian R. Smith. The R is because there's a lot of other Brians out there. But my Masonic lineage, I started with as a demolay and grew up then as a Mason, and I was a master of our lodge, number 21, Rochester Lodge number 21, back in 2012, which, Brad, sure sounds like a long time ago. And I'm very happy to be here to teach you a little bit, or just more of a conversation about etiquette. So we've got a definition of what is proper etiquette, and we've got a definition of etiquette there. And just read this one thing here: the customary code of polite behavior. That's important in society or among members of a particular profession or group. So this is spot on, kind of what we're talking about. Now, in Masonry, of course, we've got our obligations, and in some degrees, our obligations cover some of the etiquette. But really, we have a lot of customs, and some of them are very ancient, and as a guide to our polite behavior. Again, that's kind of a key phrase in the definition of etiquette. So let's just get started with that. One of the things, I know we've got about 20 minutes for this. It takes me 20 minutes just to clear my throat. And so we'll try to go through these slides pretty quickly. If you do have any questions, feel free to type into the chat. I cannot see them, but we can interrupt or we cover some things at towards the end. So the master's authority, right, is all powerful. Has the authority to rule out a brother at any time, out of order on a subject, decide what can and cannot be discussed, and should anybody feel though this power is not without, it's not like a master and commander like in the oh my goodness, what is it, the 21 books, Master and Commander. Oh, please come on, somebody help me with that. Patrick O'Brien, right? So in Patrick O'Brien's works, you got the master is all powerful. In this case, yes, powerful, but if you do feel that the master has been arbitrary, you can appeal to the Grand Lodge. So it's, but the thing is, it really is, respect and etiquette is based around the master authority in lodge. One of the basic rules is that we do not pass between the altar and the east. And as a courtesy to the master, he has to keep his eye on the three great lights. And so the question is, what are the exceptions to that rule? And so just type them into the chat. What are the exceptions to that rule? I should see fingers going like this. Or just speak up.
Degree work.
Degree work is a great one. Yeah, that's one of the exceptions. In fact, that's the only one that I can think of in the Grand Lodge of Minnesota. But a little interesting story. I was at the Grand Lodge in Ireland, and they were what I did is I was sitting in the south, and so I asked to approach the east, give a little presento to the worshipful master. So I went to the altar, saluted, went up to the east, and gave a little speech, a little presento to the worshipful master. He did not ask me to stay up in the east, so I went down the steps, the 3 steps, and I immediately started going straight back towards the altar, because I did not want to break this rule. I did not want to pass between the altar and the east. And when I took the first step in a counterclockwise direction, everybody gasped, and I froze, because clearly I had done something wrong. And in this lodge in Dublin, Ireland, you always, what is the word, preambulate? I'm not even sure what the word is, but you always
circumambulate.
Circumambulate. You always go clockwise, never counterclockwise, and I don't have this rule. So the exceptions are in the Grand Lodge of Minnesota. Yeah, degree work is where we would break this rule, but other jurisdictions, they can have their own rules. And in the end, what I did is I turned to the master and I said, what do you want me to do? And I explained the situation, my predicament. And he just said, okay, you just do what you feel comfortable with. And I went counterclockwise back to the altar, saluted, and then back to my seat. And there was no wars started over that. So that was good news right there. sitting in the east, right? So you not take a seat east unless you've been invited. Like I was talking about the story about Dublin, Ireland. I was not invited to the east, so I didn't sit in the east or stay in the east. So that is a good rule there. On the other side of it, though, you can read it in the Minnesota manual. If you are the worshipful master and there is a visiting worshipful masters, or of course somebody from the Grand Lodge, it is very customary that you invite that worshipful master to sit with you in the east, of course, if there is room. So that's kind of a corollary to this is that you don't sit in the east unless asked. But the other side of it is a great honor if you're visiting a lodge, another lodge, if you are a worshipful master, is to have that master invite you to sit with him in the east. And it's something I would recommend everybody to do. Enter the lodge room ready for labor, and that means nobody is putting on their aprons or even tying them on when in the lodge. Now, I have to find, I know I'm already guilty of this many times. I'm, just getting things on. And in fact, in Rochester Lodge number 21, the Tyler and others will lay out the officers' aprons by their chairs. And of course, you got to go in and then you've got to get your apron and you put that on at your chair. So this one, I think I do break, and I think our lodge breaks from time to time, but I like the sensibility behind it, that indeed, for sure, when lodge starts, right, when that master wraps, there shouldn't be people still, getting their aprons on. Everybody should be ready to go and ready for labor, for the master. Stand when you speak, right? No man, sits while speaking in the room, and this is just of course, courtesy in the same way that you would stand up in front of a city council, that you would stand up in front of Supreme Court judges, in the same way you would stand up in any place you heard. It's the same kind of thing, right? We stand when we speak, and it's really just simply a form of respect. If you do have a predetermined motion or discussion that you want to bring up, this is, again, etiquette. It's not in our obligations anywhere, but really it's the kind of thing that you would want to advise the master, and I would also suggest advise the secretary. And that's, I added that, include the secretary with there. That that should be no surprises. I mean, of course, there can be as part of the running of the meetings, and you shouldn't back away from something just because you saw something late and all that. But really, good Masonic and good etiquette for any kind of business meeting is you'd want to be able to let everybody know, or not everybody, but the master, the secretary, some of the key individuals know that, hey, I'm going to bring up this point, and I'd like to make a motion towards this regard, just to give the master kind of a heads up to know that you should put it on the agenda, and of course be ready for any kind of discussion related to that motion. Obey the gavel, right? And this is one that I think is pretty. Everybody obeys the gavel. But again, the master is all powerful and can use the gavel to seat a brother or to rule a brother out of order. So there is more power to the gavel than just the 1, 2, or 3 raps. One of the things that's kind of a bugaboo for me and is we've all got our routines, and after the opening of the lodge and everybody's seated and the master will rap 3 times and then we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't stand until that 3rd rap hits. I want to obey that gavel, and I know it's coming. Everybody knows it's coming, but some people, the master will start to rap, and some people are already standing up. Not terrible kind of thing, but I think it's just a touch discourteous. And so really what I do is I like to just literally obey that gavel. And the key part about this too is with the opening and closing and some of the degree work, where, for example, when the master declares that Rochester Lodge number 21 is now closed, and when he raps, that's the closure of the lodge. And it's not until he raps that your deacons would take off and do their business. The junior deacon with the Tyler, and the senior deacon to close the 3 graders and the 3 lessers. So it's that kind of etiquette that I like to see enforced, of course, not only during the business meeting part of it, but during opening and closing, and then the conduct of the candidates. Obey the gavel. Never turn your back to the master. So in the same way, we stand and we salute the master, to kind of indicate the obedience to the master and all that. Same kind of thing is you wouldn't have a discussion between two brothers about a topic and just by turning your back to the master. It'd be like if I turn my back to you right now, right? It's kind of a talking to somebody else to say, oh yeah, let's do this after I've got this meeting with the Masons, and so it's just discourteous to you, right? Because you should be then the focus of what's going on here. Saluting the master when entering and leaving the lodge, and of course this is part of the what we learn in our different degree work and all that we go to the west of the altar where we now kneel and salute the worshipful master with this sign. Same kind of thing here is that this is a form of courtesy. And in processor law number 21 is during a degree work we do delegate that responsibility to the senior, so we can we can weave people in and then get them over to the sidelines without interrupting the degree work that's going on. One of the interesting things I also saw in Dublin with the lodge there is that when they do stand to salute the worshipful master, they stand with the penal symbol, and they do that the entire time they're talking. Well, if you're standing up and just doing a committee report, maybe that's just going to be 30 seconds, you would stand all that 30 seconds with the penal sign. Well, think of the poor secretary, right, who has to stand and read all the correspondence and handle all the different duties of the secretary. That secretary, all the time that they're standing, is standing with the penal sign and doing all their paperwork with one hand as they are, doing the penal sign with the other. Right? So taken to the extreme, I think, I love the way we do it in Minnesota. And but it really is a very important and key part of it. And the point number D down there, right? A lazy, sloppy, or improper, that should not be done. It should be a very crisp, clean, square corners, and it should really be that you are indeed honoring the worshipful master with this proper etiquette. Voting is mandatory. This one, as I was going through this Masonic etiquette, you can see the link down there. Very, very useful kind of resource. I have to say that I failed this one a long time ago, and that's when my name was on the ballot to be worshipful master of the lodge. And one of my personal things is I don't like voting for myself. So if I'm going for any kind of office, I will not vote for myself. And it's just kind of my things going on. Well, what happened is I did not vote for myself as master of the lodge. We had everything was handwritten and everything was counted up, and the committee that was handling the counting said, X number, 25, 30 in favor of Brian R. Smith being the next master, and then 1 scattered. And you can see with this that I know that was me who the scattered was, but the implication is that there might have been a brother who did not want me to be master, which is of course fine, perfect. But here we are, voting is mandatory, and seeing this, I have learned, right, that it is important to vote. It is everybody's obligation, everybody's duty to vote, not only in a lodge, but of course, civically. So it's a very important one here, and I know I've learned that. Shouldering the work, right? It's always good Masonic success, right? And we are a beehive of industry, and it's good to share the work, shoulder the work. The more people, the more men, and that we can get on different tasks and all that, just makes the life easier for everybody. So when you come to lodge, be prepared to volunteer for things, be prepared to suggest things, but then add to those things with your abilities. And so this is another key element of the etiquette of really what makes a Masonic lodge very powerful and work well. The correction of verbal errors. So a lot of times during degree work and all that, from time to time, individuals can have errs with their work. And with that, it really is the role of the worshipful master to correct any mistakes, and no other individual. And key to this, I like, is or a designee, right? Where I can, as worshipful master, I can delegate this responsibility to others. Now, a good example would be if you're doing the obligation as the master up at the altar. What I always do ahead of time, weeks ahead of time, I'll check with the senior, whoever is going to be the senior deacon, and to say, hey, could you also brush up on the obligation and follow along with me, so that if I do have a mental problem with it, that you can help me out. And so, as master, it is indeed, the primary role and responsibility is with the worshipful master. But often, what needs to be done ahead of time is to coordinate and to prearrange a designee. So there is one individual who's maybe on the sideline with an open book, right, the open cipher, and being able to offer assistance for the group. One individual, one person, not that there's 3 or 4 or 10 people saying, oh, well, that was wrong. Like the grumpy old past masters, right? Everybody always has a corner of grumpy old past masters, and oh, wow, that's not the way we used to do it. And so you don't want that, especially during degree work, right? Because it should be focused on the candidates, and the more distractions you have with that, the less quality then you have, less etiquette that you have as part of the ceremony. Use of proper Masonic titles and names. This was another area that I know I was deficient in, even before I became a master. Just referring to people by their first names, which is how I knew them as friends even before I became brothers. And so, but another part of Masonic etiquette is to work on these proper Masonic names, and I would like to say too that in Rochester Lodge number 21, and I'm sure other lodges too, what we're trying to do is more and more is to work our language this way, so that we are talking about the worshipful master, Friedeland, and Brother Secretary, Brother Junior Warrens, and so the different proper titles, trying to do that, and using people's last names rather than the first names. And it just, I think it adds a lot more authority and authentication, and again, etiquette, and just a proper way to behave. And then the prayers, of course, are non-sectarian, and so I love the concept of Grand Architect of the Universe. And so we as Masons, we choose whatever religion we want, but we come together with kind of a love of a single deity, the one God, and but non-sectarian kinds of prayers and all that. So this is just a beautiful thing, and just something to reinforce, because in our lodge we have people of many different faiths, and so this is just one of those beautiful areas where I can look at Masonry and say, yeah, it's not a religion, of course, but I can look at it and say it's really steeped and it's very strong in the belief in God. And kind of related to this too, and we don't quite cover that, but I think we all know that when in lodge assembled, we don't talk about politics, right, and we don't talk about religion. And so these are two very key things that is also part of our etiquette. And then must we even mention, right, cell phone noises? I think a lot of lodges have kind of a rule, right? If your cell phone goes off, it's like, $5 for the benevolent fund, and so that will teach bad behavior there. No bad postures or off-color jokes, or obviously smoking, vaping, or drinking. And of course, side conversations, I know even in our lodge happen from time to time, but obviously try to keep them at a minimum, and keep them, of course, be very courteous. There's sometimes you have an older past master, and it's just like, what did he say? And so you can have these side conversations, and you would hate to stop them from happening, because you want everybody to be inclusive in terms of the conversations that are going on, but obviously keep them to the minimum. So like I said, basically, when in doubt, follow the golden rule, right? If you're a master, how would you want the behavior to be? So you kind of answer the question, what is the proper Masonic etiquette? It's simply following good rules of manners, right? It makes the lodge pleasant for everyone. It gives people a kind of a concrete foundation from which to build and grow and to improve yourselves in Masonry, right? If everybody's following these basic tenets of etiquette, then the new brothers that come in, they can see that, they can see the respect that is being held, they can follow that, and that's a good guide, and then allows them to grow in the lodge and to grow as a Mason, and of course to also grow as a civic person. Because some of the things that we're talking about for Masonic etiquette would be good for a Masonic meeting, and of course in the same way it'd be good for a city council meeting. So with that, any questions or thoughts, observations, things we can add to this presentation, or things we got wrong? Right?
I have a question. Early in the presentation, it mentioned stand when you speak, even the master. I don't know if I misunderstood that.
I hope, does it say, oh, it includes the worshipful master and his officers. Interesting. Yeah, I would, I say that's wrong.
I was going to say my custodian may have been a little crazy when he went through with
How does that look? Does that look better? This includes the worshipful masters, officers.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know if I misread that. I'm like, wait a minute.
No, yeah, very good. Yeah, I was going through so quick, I just went right over that. Thank you. Yeah, other good comments and thoughts. I'm going to save this one.
I have oh, Adam has got one. I'll let him go.
Oh, no, you're all good. Go ahead.
Oh.
No, all good.
Doing the pledge, one question we have always had, and this is a perfect one for Right Worshipful Brother Whitstrand there. Are we required to seat everybody and then stand them back up to do the pledge?
Do you want me to answer that as a custodian or as a person? As a custodian, you seat everybody. Practically, I say, if you want to call the lodge up as the deacons are reporting so they don't have to sit, especially when your deacons are considerably older, I do that. So I cheat.
We make the deacons sit down and then wrap them right back up again.
Well, it depends on the age of your deacon and whether he's... We've got some that I do not make sit.
Yeah.
Just, if they can walk that far, I'm really happy.
One of the things that we have an older secretary, and our brother secretary, it's almost, I wouldn't say a joke, but he will ask the worshipful master, may I remain seated for the correspondence? And the secretary will say, he will ask, if it's the worshipful master's will and pleasure, may I remain seated during the reading of the correspondence? And the worshipful master, of course, will reply, yes, of course. But we know the question is coming. So as the worshipful masters, I always prompt the worshipful masters is, when brother secretary is about to stand, say, brother secretary, it is my will and pleasure that you remain seated. Right. So it is, with the stand when you speak, but it is definitely the right of the worshipful master as
modify.
Right Worshipful Brother, Woodstrad indicated to say, modify it, as needed by the lodge.
I was going to offer two more things that I would clarify. One was the first one about not walking between the Bible and the East. That's correct, but the actual rule is you don't walk between the master and the Bible.
Yeah.
So when he's at the altar, you can walk behind him.
Like that.
That would be the actual rule. You do not cross between the master and the altar. He cannot lose sight of the Bible, but not the East. But the easiest way to tell somebody, say, don't walk between the master and, and we just change that to the East.
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah.
Good.
The second one I would add as a clarification, when you said everybody must vote, the Tyler cannot vote.
Right. Okay.
So there is an exception. The Tyler is not allowed to vote either by proxy or in person. And he cannot go in and out the door. Nobody leaves.
He's not even supposed to be in the room.
Correct. But you can't switch him out so he
Right.
could come in and vote.
Mhm.
What I'm getting at is he cannot vote. That door is locked and he can't move.
And only Master Masons can vote.
Correct. So just as a, information thing.
So what's the counsel for non-U.S. citizens in regards to the Pledge of Allegiance?
They would stand out of respect, but they don't have to necessarily give the pledge, because we have the same thing with religious objections.
Yeah, we in fact we had one of our past masters he's Swiss, so he's not an American. And what we did for that is, because normally the master will say, "Your brothers, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance." And what we did at the time that his brother, worship brother Livius, was in the East, we had the senior deacon lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And so but he does stand during the Pledge of Allegiance again, but he doesn't say it.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Other thoughts, comments, things that are maybe missing from here that you think might be valuable to add?
Yeah, I do have one question about the Tyler being outside. I've been outside the door, I think, for 6 years now. It's good because at my age, I'm not bickering with the younger guys. The bad thing is, really don't know what's going on in the lodge meetings.
Well, one of the things, and I don't want to get anybody into trouble, but in a lodge in southeast Minnesota that is one greater than 20 and one less than 22, we let the Tyler into the, after the opening and closing, we let the Tyler into the lodge room to, participate as part of the discussion with the meetings. And we have a closed circuit TV up on the wall, so he can see, as people come in or out and move around the building, but we allow that. So I don't want to get anybody in Rochester lodge number greater than 20 and less than 22 in trouble, but that's what we do.
Well, I can answer that too, that we do essentially the same thing in my lodge in Biwabic, who I would not give you the number of. But once the door is open and he sits right inside the door, he can see the outside door of our building.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody opens the door, he just gets up, walks out, closes the door. So yeah, we do that because we want him to participate.
Yeah.
So is it legal? No. So
that's the other. It's one of those bad lodges. It's not number 21 though. Sure, yeah.
Most of the ones I've seen do the same thing.
And I've never yelled at you for it either, have I?
No, you yell at us for other things, but not that.
I guess
On the
I would say
slide that's up on the screen right now, voting is mandatory. Again, Rolf can probably, right whether you can correct me, but isn't it only Master Masons that are technically allowed to vote? Many lodges allow everyone to vote so that the newer members can feel a part of it. But I think that's one of the things that really needs to be explained to the new members, that for official purposes, only Master Mason are voting until you went through all the degrees and you're a full member. Because when you have a contentious vote all of a sudden, you don't want to all of a sudden reject someone's opinion, but you do have to abide by the code.
Correct.
And it's Master Masons of the local lodge, right? So if you have visiting Master Masons, they cannot vote either.
And the Grandmaster.
What about the Grandmaster?
Nope, can't vote.
Cannot vote,
Unless he's a member of that lodge.
Right.
Isn't the Grandmaster a member of all lodges?
Not for voting purposes. He can open your lodge if he wants to, but he can't vote.
Wow, I did not know that.
I have another general question about this lodge decorum. With the way younger people live in society versus older people, is it better to really be strict about this decorum in a lodge to please some of the older people, or is it such that maybe you ought to loosen up a little bit for the younger people, or are the younger people really looking for more formal decorum? That seems to be a question. Are you stiff at these lodge meetings, or even sitting outside the door? I hear a lot of laughing and stuff in the lodge, and I think, well, what's going on here? What? And we did have one visitor from Iceland come to our lodge, and I think he was really put out because it was just seemed to be more casual than what I understand that a lot of the Scandinavian lodges are.
Yeah, I've visited lodges around the world, and they are very formal. To the point where it's tuxedo, white gloves, a lot of bling with everybody. Very I mentioned, you just standing with the the penal sign as you're talking for 30 minutes. You're still holding a penal sign. Very formal proceedings, and yeah, we have a little bit more relaxed attitude, and I think for sure, maybe even when you get outside the Twin Cities, if you've got a more rural kind of lodge, you're going to have the dress code is going to be more relaxed. And we in number 21, we all come into, at least in Minnesota, we all come into the lodge dressed the same, right? We're all wearing the same things, and so you really wouldn't want to kick somebody out because they weren't wearing a tuxedo. But what I do like to see is these core. Nothing wrong with having a good time. Nothing wrong with enjoying each other's company. It's nothing wrong with running a good, clean, crisp business meeting. But I do like to see the more of the formality. And in terms of talking about Worshipful Brother Smith, rather than Brian, and the younger members, I think will appreciate that, especially if they move up the chairs. And it really should give them kind of a better feel for the history of the Masons, and where we came from, and of course where we're trying to stay and where we're trying to get to. Now, I'm sure other people have different thoughts on this.
Can I add a little bit to that? What I usually teach when I talk about the etiquette in the lodge is to say the superintendents of the lodge while in session is the prerogative of the master. So therefore, his wants, desires, and how he wants to run his meeting are clearly up to him. So therefore, we in our lodge have the idea that we keep the formality, opening and closing and everything else. And then sometimes during some of the discussions or other things that we are doing, we say we will dispense with normal routines and give liberty for the purpose of that time until the sound of the gavel. And then you go back to decorum. So you have the option of changing the character of your lodge for what you are doing.
Yeah, very good. We do that too. Often for lodge education, will be something presented on the screen, but that screen comes down out of the ceiling right before the east, right? So the master wouldn't be able to see it. The master will put the lodge at ease that allow us to freely move about. And so we do, switch between a more formal and informal way. I think that is a perfect hybrid of the two.
Mm-hmm.
I can kind of speak as far as a younger lodge goes. Our lodge is pretty young in both, membership and age, actually, as far as the active members go. Yeah, there's a lot of stepping out of the decorum and, side conversation, stuff like that. But there were many times where we had to try and get people back on track and respect the decorum of the lodge, and nobody really complained. They all respected that. It's just their nature was to side talk and stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, no. So I don't see it as a problem with putting more of this getting a more formalized thing as far as our lodge goes.
I would even go one step further, agreeing both with Frank and Brian and Ralph. So far, you've seen through the years that decorum is not really taught within the lodges per se. This is one of the first formal hearings of decorum for a lodge that I've seen shared, and it's very well done. However, these new brothers that are joining lodges, regardless of their age, they're not being taught this, so they don't know what a proper decorum within a Masonic lodge is. And without that knowledge, it's real hard to hold them accountable to something when we haven't properly taught them. And I think it goes to show that the lodges have failed their members. Most people are coming to Freemasonry because they're looking to be part of something that's bigger, larger, something to improve themselves. And when they get here, many times we fail them in different regards, and this is one of them that we could all, from all lodges, can use some instruction to be able to pass on to others so that they can learn to respect this decorum, because it's not an old way, it's just a proper way of interacting. We can have disagreements, but we can do it in such a way that we can respect each other and still have a conversation. That's part of decorum, and I think that's something that we need to get back to in many lodges.
I will add a little bit to that, Sean, that we usually include that as part of our mentoring. And the minute the person is done with a first degree, we cover behavior in the lodge through one of our lodge education programs things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great place to handle it, because I know that's one of the things that we make a mistake too, is that after the first degree, the brother will come back and it'll be in his first meeting and you're lost, right? Because everything went through it. Like, I don't know when to stand, when to salute, when to cross my arms over my chest, or yeah. And we have them sit, of course, with somebody who can help them through the opening and closing and all the different things. But we don't formally teach it, and it should be formally taught. I think that is one of the areas we need to grow in number 21.
That brings me into a question I have is, this is an excellent presentation. I'd love to take it to our lodge and present it. Will it be available?
Yes, I posted it to the Lodge Education Officers group in Facebook. So it's there. It's been there for probably a year or two, but it's hard to find in Facebook thingy. So just let me know who I can send it to distribute it or to get it available to everybody.
You could send it to me, and I should be able to get it distributed.
Okay.
The deputies or whoever else needs to get them.
I mean, that'd be, it just, yeah, that's.
There we go.
I say I just posted the link there, so you should be able to get in. Otherwise, if you're not in the group, just let us know and we'll get you there.
Oh yeah, I'm not in this one yet.
Is this the Leo group?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great group. And so in there, it's in the files section of that group, but you've got to scroll through it a little bit to get down to it. And the changes, okay, the changes I just made aren't in that place. So I will update that file in that group.
Another question. Well, someone else.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
And the question I have, again, is when you talk about not having anything controversial, or be careful in what you're talking about in the lodge, then we come to the Leo presentation. And I've always wondered why in the lodge you can't have more Leo presentations of applying Masonry as to what's going on in today's world. It seems like we keep talking about what happened in the ages past, but we have so many problems now going on that as Masons, how should we approach some of these problems? Then again, are some of these problems controversial?
Well, if the problem is people not wearing enough blaze orange when they're going to go deer hunting, that's probably something that can be covered. But yeah, boy, I'd love to hear, from a cohesion point of view, I don't think I would like to use the Leo for political or religious kinds of views. Now, that doesn't mean that outside of a tiled lodge that you can't have these good, honest discussions, because that's what we need to do. We need to talk about all these kinds of things. But yeah, I would, from my perspective, which I'm just a small little cog, I would say that's probably not the best way to do it.
Well, then what do you have for Leo presentations that will really draw the membership in?
Well, I
Yeah,
think one of the things that if I weigh in on that, I think one of the things that I think would be would be valuable there, Brother Frank, would be that we take a look at the lessons of the third degree and we break down those working tools, and we tie the words and the verbiage that's in the ritual and tie that into some of the presences today. Leadership just recently faced this with an article coming out and, approaching, how do you effectively as Masons lead in these times? And one of the things I think we as Masons forget is that ability to whisper counsel, and that doesn't always need to necessarily be in the ear of a brother. Take the individual to the side where it's just a one-on-one conversation. Have that belly-to-belly exchange about it. There, I think you can find a better understanding than doing it in more of a public or open setting.
Another thing that we've done in 21-2 is that what we do is we have non-tiled presentations. So we have presenters come in from outside of Masonry, and it is then, say, more public domain kind of thing. And yearly we have somebody coming in from men's mental health, suicide prevention, and other topics. And I had one which was we brought in the heads of the different bodies represented in Southeast Minnesota, including the Eastern Star came in. So in a non-tiled setting, we would then have the presentations, and that is, these are topics then that should be more interesting for a wide variety for the brothers. And then once the presentation is done, we thank them very much, we send them out, and then we tile the lodge.
So you put the lodge at refreshment programs?
No, well, what we do is we don't open it yet. So our meetings start at 7. So we have the Leo presentation right away in an untiled lodge. The presentation happens, we thank them, and then we close the doors and we tile the lodge, and then we have our business meeting.
And I'll go a little bit farther. For ours, we will normally 4 times a year have a meal beforehand and have the person talk at the meal.
Oh, yeah.
And then we go into the meeting afterward.
So I think there's opportunities out there to explore areas and to bring in speakers and topics that are more worldly, more interesting for a wide variety. It doesn't all have to be Masonic education. But again, it's just me. I would tend to try to stay away from religion and politics, because we get plenty of that on Facebook. We don't need it in a lodge room. I don't know how many of my friends are epidemiologists, but I'm sure all of you are epidemiologists too.
One thing, this is another subject I remember from Right Worshipful Brother there during one of his schools of instructions. And this kind of ties into that with the Leo program getting kind of over the edge into the political scene and stuff. We had a presentation, I was able to speak with the Leo ahead of time and actually foresaw it kind of moving towards a more political side of discussions and stuff. So I actually had my gavel in hand ready to go during the Leo presentation, but the subject I remember is, and this happened, I found this out after, but the kind of the decorum on how you bring order to the lodge. I was wondering if Rolf could touch on that, as far as, you don't want to go instantly to the gavel. Is that correct?
Well, you use that as a last resort. If you can't bring order to the lodge because of whatever the problem is, then your gavel is the last resort. What I normally do in most of those things, and it wouldn't be for a Leo presentation, but it's for the discussions that take place in the lodge, is to enforce that all discussion must go through the master. You never have them talking to each other, which controls the speed, controls the anger, because you end up then refereeing everything that happens. And then you can ask questions before you say, okay, now I want more information from somebody else. So you can control how fast it happens, which brings down the exuberance.
I have another question. When it comes to voting and running the meeting, I don't know if this is part of decorum or not, and that is whether you should be following Robert's Rules of Order or not following Robert's Rules of Order. Master doing his job.
Masons do not follow Robert's Rules of Order.
But you sure see the Robert's Rules of Order being brought up as the protocol or the procedure in a lodge, and I was wondering about that.
If you read the code, it says we do not follow Robert's Rules of Order, period, because we have essentially, the master has the authority, which is not true in Robert's Rules of Order. He's a committee chairman, not the officer in charge.
Ralph,
Because for instance, and I use this as an example, under Robert's Rules of Order, the chairman cannot make a motion. In Masons, the master can make a motion.
Oh,
And most people don't realize that.
yeah. We
not realize
generally, our master would generally ask, for a motion, right?
Yeah.
And,
But he can make it.
Well, no, I'm not voting for the officers each year. So many lodges, meetings I've been to, they say, well, they'll call for once, call the second time, call the third time, bring up a motion, second the motion, and all that stuff. As a master, you wouldn't necessarily have to follow that procedure.
The procedure for voting is in the code and in the manual. And you are supposed to follow that, and it's always supposed to be a secret ballot. Do we all follow it? No.
Ralph, Ralph, I'd like to go back to Mike's comments real quick about the, controlling the temperament. I've heard it referenced in lodges that a brother should only really stand and speak like one time on a topic. Would you kind of alleviate on that? I mean, do you allow back and forth to take place, or?
That depends on the topic and whether or not it needs to be people expressing their point of view. And that's at the discretion of the master. For instance, in Grand Lodge, we say you may only speak once and you may speak for only a certain length of time. Now, in a lodge, that's not the case. The master decides what is allowed and what is not allowed. If he said, I'm only going to allow you to speak once, and then we're going to hear from the other side, and then we'll hear from everybody else, then that's the rules. You make them up. You have that authority.
The John Gann approach, or most workable John Gann approach.
Mm-hmm.
Well, excellent. I think that was an absolutely fantastic presentation, Worshipful Brother Brian. One I know I really enjoyed and got more than I anticipated coming into it. So something I think many of us are passionate about. And, it's, I think Worshipful Brother Brother Frank referred to a great point too, is that I think it's important that we don't lose sight of the importance of decorum when you read etiquette and the definition of it, boy, does it not ring out that that's something that sure is needed in America today.
Yeah, and that's the very powerful message we're talking about, how to, for younger Masons coming up, even for older Masons, coming back to the lodge, you have the opportunity to just set the tone for good, proper group etiquette and respect and decorum. The opportunity is to set that in our lodge. And if we can set that in our lodge, in our own little, capsule there, our own little microcosm, right? There's quite an opportunity then for people to learn about how to stand in front of a city council, how to stand up on a soapbox on a street corner, and be able to get their messages across in just the same kind of way, with proper respect and proper etiquette.
Very much so. Is there any other questions or comments anyone like to share here?
Just one question. Do you, for that Facebook LEO, do you have to be an LEO to join?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It's not my group.
I just got approved and I put down as secretary, so you're good.
Okay, sounds good. Or future LEO possibly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any additional words of wisdom that you'd like to share this evening, Right Worshipful Brother?
I would only add one more thing that I think all Masons have to realize and be aware of. And it has to do with, like Worshipful Brother Brian was talking about your corner of past masters, is that the leadership and power in Masonry is circular. You start at the bottom and you may go as high as you wish. When you get done with that, I'm sorry, you go right back to the bottom. You are a member. That's it. And you wear that white apron. And we have to remember that. You raise to a certain point of power and then expect the decorum to follow. And then you go back and you have to go back to being the person who is just a member and respect that same type of decorum.
Now, if that coming up, that means you shouldn't wear a past master's apron in the lodge?
You can, but you are only a member of the lodge at that point, whether or not you have been past master or anything else. You are a member.
That's a great point.
Your power has gone from absolute to obsolete. Right?
Ah!
Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to open polling, brothers. If you wouldn't mind, please taking a few minutes to fill that out, and then we'll shut down here. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.